She was the woman whose laughter could lift an entire room, the blonde spark of joy who made America believe in magic. But behind the sunshine glow and the iconic giggle, there was a truth she carried alone, quietly, heavily, painfully. I didn't feel joyful. I was scared. I was afraid, Goldie Hawn once admitted. Not anxiety, she said, panic attacks, the kind that steal your breath and make even the brightest spotlight feel like a cage. At 79 years old, after a lifetime of being crowned Hollywood's sweetheart, Goldie is finally peeling back the curtain. Not to expose a scandal, not to stir drama, but to reclaim her voice. A voice that had been silenced by humiliation, arrogance, and disrespect. For the first time, she reveals the 6 actors she secretly despised, 6 men who shaped her career not through inspiration, but through pain. Men who called her sweetheart in public, then whispered she was difficult, fake, or overrated in private. Men who laughed at her, interrupted her, dismissed her, used their influence against her, or spoke to her as though she were still the naive girl in a bikini scene. Some were icons, some were legends, some were geniuses, but to Goldie, they were wounds she carried in silence for decades. Tonight, we begin the story she never meant to tell, but now refuses to hide. Of all 6 names on Goldie Hawn's silent blacklist, Bill Murray sits firmly at the top. Not because of a single heated argument, not because of an artistic disagreement, but because of a moment so deeply humiliating, so unexpectedly cruel, that Goldie carried it with her for decades. It happened during what was supposed to be a simple table read in the late 1980s, a charming studio comedy crafted to pair America's sweetheart with comedy's wild card. On paper, it sounded perfect. In reality, it became a memory she wished she could erase. Murray arrived an hour late, stumbling into the room loud, chaotic, and unapologetic. His hair was messy, his shirt untucked, his coffee cup half empty, and somehow he made sure everyone noticed. Without greeting anyone, he tossed the cup onto the script pages and announced, "Now we can start." Goldie looked up at him. Something inside her tightened. This wasn't going to be playful mischief. This was going to be disrespect wrapped in genius. As the reading began, Goldie delivered her lines with that warm rhythm and playful timing she was famous for. She was a professional, prepared, present, and giving the room her best. But then Murray cut her off mid-scene. He leaned back, smirked, and said loudly, "Why don't you try acting like you've done drama before?" The room erupted in laughter, not hers. She froze, not visibly, not dramatically, just a quiet, controlled stillness only someone with years of Hollywood survival instincts could maintain. She slowly closed her script, stood up, and walked out. Not a word spoken, not a tear shed, just silence, sharp, powerful, unforgettable. The next morning, her team informed the producers Goldie Hawn was out. No statements, no explanations, no second chances. Later, when a close friend asked why she refused to return, Goldie said quietly, "He thinks unpredictability is genius. I think it's exhausting." After that day, she rewired her career. She refused projects with unstable co-stars. She rejected male-led comedies that required her to handle big egos. She chose peace over chaos every single time. And when asked years later if she would ever work with Bill Murray again, Goldie didn't hesitate. Her voice was calm, steady, and final. No interest. A lifetime of poise distilled into 2 words. If Bill Murray wounded her pride, then Warren Beatty wounded something deeper. her trust in how powerful men operated behind the curtain of Hollywood. With Warren, it didn't begin with conflict. It began with a single, simple word: no. In the late 1970s, Warren Beatty was untouchable, Hollywood's charming king, the industry's most famous ladies' man, and a man used to hearing a yes from every direction. When he turned his attention to Goldie Hawn, he didn't see a colleague. He saw conquest. He invited her to dinner, then to private parties, then to his Beverly Hills home. Everyone knew what that pattern meant. Everyone knew how this story usually ended. But Goldie, polite, warm, gracious, held her ground every time. She laughed, she deflected, she gently declined, she never wavered, and that was the moment his charm disappeared. Almost overnight, Goldie began feeling invisible pressures tightening around her career. Projects she had been promised evaporated. Directors who had praised her suddenly pulled away. Producers who had spoken excitedly about her stopped returning calls. One day, a producer finally whispered the truth. Warren says, "You're difficult, not serious material." Just like that, her reputation, carefully built through hard work and consistency, was reduced to a smear from a man who didn't get what he wanted. He doesn't handle rejection, Goldie confided years later. He punishes it. Those 6 words explain everything. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, calculated, and cruel, the kind of behind-the-scenes sabotage that only someone with enormous power could orchestrate. And Warren Beatty, at that time, had more power than nearly any man in Hollywood. Goldie never confronted him. She didn't scream, accuse, or expose him. She simply survived him. Years later, fate brought them face to face again at an awards show. Warren approached with that familiar smile, as if nothing had ever happened. He leaned in, ready to charm, ready to reclaim the air in the room. Goldie met his eyes, she smiled softly, and then she turned her back mid-sentence. Calm, graceful, devastating. A rejection far colder than the one he once received. The third name on Goldie Hawn's silent blacklist is perhaps the most surprising of all: Dustin Hoffman, a man the world hailed as a genius, but to Goldie, he became the face of a humiliation she never forgot. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't a rumor. This was an experience that cut deep into her confidence at a pivotal moment in her career. In the early 1980s, Goldie was ready for something new. She had already conquered comedy, made millions laugh, carried films with her charm, her timing, her irresistible presence, but she wanted to show something more. She wanted drama, complexity, emotional depth. So when she was invited to read opposite Hoffman for a prestigious, serious drama, it felt like the chance to evolve beyond the blonde sparkle Hollywood always boxed her into. Everyone believed the pairing would be electrifying. And it was, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Halfway through their scene, Hoffman abruptly stopped. He stared at her, stone-faced, cold, almost dismissive. Then, without turning back to her, he addressed the room full of producers. "She's still playing it like a sitcom." The words were a dagger, a public belittling, a moment designed not to critique, but to diminish. Goldie stood there, script in hand, refusing to let the pain show. She finished the scene with flawless control, thanked everyone with unwavering grace, and walked out before anyone could offer an apology she didn't want. The next morning, she called her agent. "I'm out," she said. "I won't fight for respect in a room full of men who already decided I'm a joke." Those words were her boundary, her shield, her liberation. From that day onward, she never worked with Dustin Hoffman again. She never auditioned for him again. She never allowed his shadow near her confidence again. When asked years later about that moment, Goldie delivered a quiet, cutting truth. Some men forget they're not directing the women around them. Hoffman thought he had exposed her weakness, but in reality, he exposed his own arrogance. And Goldie? She walked away with her dignity intact and her self-worth preserved. If the humiliation with Hoffman hurt her pride, then what happened with Chevy Chase broke something far more personal, a friendship she once believed was real. On camera, their chemistry sparkled. In 1978, Foul Play looked like the perfect pairing. Goldie, America's golden sweetheart, and Chevy, comedy's rising superstar. Audiences loved them. The studio adored them. The movie became a hit, but behind the warm smiles and playful banter, a far darker truth was unfolding. Chevy walked onto that set like he owned not just the studio, but the entire business. He mocked lines, rewrote jokes, shifted scenes to spotlight himself. His ego wasn't just big, it was suffocating. And whenever Goldie delivered a bigger laugh than him, a natural outcome given her brilliance, he would mutter under his breath, "She's lucky to be here." Lucky. A woman who carried half the industry on her back. A woman who had proven her worth in film after film. A woman whose talent was undeniable. Goldie tried to keep peace. She joked. She eased tension. She diffused arguments. She did what women in Hollywood had been conditioned to do, smooth over the messes powerful men left behind. But the cracks widened. One night, after yet another clash about a scene, Chevy stormed off set, refusing to return until the director rewrote it to his satisfaction. Hours passed, the crew waited. The air thickened. Goldie didn't yell, she didn't fight. She simply sat quietly on a set of steps, speaking only to her stylist. "He's not funny when the cameras stop rolling. He's just mean." By the end of filming, they couldn't look each other in the eye. The studio desperately wanted a sequel. There were millions on the table, but Goldie didn't hesitate. Not interested, she told her agent. And that was the end. For her, it wasn't about the money, it was about dignity. By the time Goldie Hawn reached the fifth name on her silent blacklist, she believed she had already seen every shade of arrogance Hollywood could offer. She survived the volatility of Murray, the vindictive power of Beatty, the dismissive cruelty of Hoffman, the ego-driven spite of Chevy Chase. She thought nothing could surprise her anymore, until Sean Penn proved her wrong. This wasn't an on-set fight. It wasn't career sabotage. It wasn't even private disrespect. It happened publicly, under glittering chandeliers in a ballroom full of Hollywood's elite. It was 2014, at a Malibu charity gala dedicated to mental health, a topic Goldie cared about deeply. She prepared a quiet, heartfelt speech, one meant to inspire compassion, not applause. When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent, except for one man. From his table, Sean Penn let out a loud, dramatic sigh. He rolled his eyes, then said, just loud enough for everyone around him to hear, "Another celebrity wellness sermon." Several people glanced at him in discomfort, but Penn wasn't finished. After Goldie completed her speech, earning warm applause from the room, Penn leaned back in his chair, smirked, and delivered the line that would scar her memory. She should stick to giggling. A lifetime of achievement reduced to a giggle. Goldie didn't react, she didn't flinch. She smiled gracefully, lifted her glass toward the crowd, and quietly left the event before dessert was served. Only in the car, away from the flashing lights, the polite faces, the forced applause, did she finally whisper, "My whole career, and I'm still reduced to giggles." That was the moment she drew her final line. From that night forward, Goldie refused to attend any event where Sean Penn's name appeared on the guest list. When asked in a later interview about her feelings toward him, she didn't express anger, just a calm, unshakable boundary. Not my energy. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply done. You'd expect the final name on Goldie Hawn's silent blacklist to belong to a rival, a difficult co-star, or one of the loud, unpredictable comedians she'd learned to avoid. But the truth was far more unexpected and far more painful. It was Kirk Douglas, one of Hollywood's most powerful, respected, and iconic figures. Their story didn't begin with hostility, it began with admiration. Goldie, an Oscar winner in her own right, respected him deeply. But respect doesn't protect you from being diminished, not even on a stage meant to celebrate your achievements. It happened in the late 1990s at an industry panel. Goldie arrived as an established actress, a producer, a woman who had carved out her own legacy. Kirk greeted her with his charismatic grin, kissed her hand, and said, "You haven't aged a day, sweetheart." The crowd laughed. Goldie smiled politely, but inside that single word, sweetheart, stung like a reminder of every stereotype she had spent decades breaking free from. The panel began, and that's when the true wound formed. Kirk interrupted her not once, not twice, but 3 times, cutting her off mid-sentence, finishing her thoughts for her, correcting her insights as though she were a child speaking out of turn. Every time she opened her mouth, he seized the moment to reassert his dominance, to show the room he was still the man in charge. A moderator later admitted you could actually feel her frustration. She went from glowing to stone cold. After the event, Goldie confided to a close friend, "He talks to me like I'm still the blonde in a bikini scene. I've won an Oscar." Those words were heartbreaking because they revealed the deepest truth of all. Some men, no matter how legendary, could never see her beyond the role she played in their minds. Interestingly, she stayed close with Michael Douglas, whom she always described as a gentleman, kind, respectful, modern. But of Kirk, she never spoke again. Later in her life, she summed up her feelings in one devastating sentence: "Some men don't deserve a second act in your memory." And perhaps the cruelest part? Kirk Douglas never knew he was on her list.